Welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, hosted by Mark Vena, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vena, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Tuesday, December 14th, 2021. One of the really great things about working in the tech analyst space is intersecting with some great journalists. And I have the pleasure to have on today's podcast, Kif Leswing. Kif, let me bring Kif up on the screen here. There he is. Hey, Kif, how are you?
I'm doing great.
This is the first podcast I'm doing with Kif. I've spoken to Kif a couple of times previously, but Kif is a technology journalist who works for that vaunted business channel, CNBC, which has been around for a few years. But Kif, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for taking the time.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about your background, before we get into some of the tech topics, including Apple, which is kind of everybody's favorite thing to talk about. And we'll get into that. Let's talk a little bit about your background first.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I've been doing this for about 10 years now. That actually sounds pretty crazy, but it's pretty much the only thing I've done since I graduated from college. And I joined the industry at the right time because, obviously there's a lot of different coverage of a lot of things. Politics never goes away. But when I started covering tech, it was starting to become clear this was changing the world. I mean, I think I had just gotten my first iPhone. And then 2 weeks later, I joined Gizmodo as an intern. So, that's the rise of the smartphone has kind of been the rise of my career as well.
Were you at Gizmodo when they had that issue with? This is going to test my memory, by the way. Didn't they have the thing where there was a phone left?
Yeah, I joined right after that. Some of the people who had been involved with that had just recently left, but it was, obviously a big part of the mythos there. And as an intern, one of my roles was I had to line up in front of Apple stores to get review units because Apple had cut Gizmodo off. Like no iPad, no iPhone. So me, the junior guy, this is probably 2012. I was, as an intern, they were like, oh, go sit in front of this Apple store all night. Cause it was still, back then, there was still the whole lineups thing. So, that's really how it got started there. Yeah.
But what's fun about that, because, I live over at Santana Row in San Jose, and I live right across the street from the Valley Fair Mall, where there's been an Apple store there for years. And like you said, in the old days, before you could do everything online and avoid waiting at, 3 o'clock in the morning on a long line, I did that. But what's fascinating about this, and I'm sure you'll say the same thing, the things that you learn from other people online when you're online for 3 or 4 hours is fascinating. It's an education experience.
They're really nice people, and especially when they're early adopters, they have a lot of different fingers and tech and thoughts, and you can get ahead of the crowds, and I always really enjoyed it. When I just joined at Gizmodo, there was a thing at the time where Apple products would release later in mainland China than they did in the United States. So there were people there, with stacks and stacks of bills, going to go get their four iPhone, I think 4S maybe, 5 at the time, and put them in their suitcases and bring them to Hong Kong and China. So that early adopters, and so that was a big part of the business back then. And I remember talking to some of those people. That was really cool. Later, another line that was really fun that I got to hang out in is I was in a line. Do you remember John? So Apple used to have this designer, Johnny Ive. He's this legend in the industry, and he came out with this book. Right when it was kind of clear he was starting to step back, he did this retrospective book that's huge at hundreds of dollars, and it's just photos of all the products. And they only sent them to a few Apple stores, and one of the places they got sent to was the Soho Apple store. So I later went there, and the people who were in line to check out or buy a Johnny Ive book were like the hardest core of the hardcore.
Well, it's amazing because, and I think you have to almost be in the Bay Area to experience it, because the personalities that you meet of people who'll be up at 2:00 in the morning with an overnight bag. In those days are pretty much gone. Although there are people still that, they'll even.
Some people still do it, but it's not what it used to be. It's not what it used to be. And then the pandemic, Apple didn't even want that. They didn't want any of that publicity. So, they really did a pick up. And it's not the same. It's not, I still use a stock image from one of the first iPhone launches, and someone got dressed up as one and showed up to the line dressed up. And I still use that stock image all the time, and it used to be kind of a Woodstock for gadget nerds a little bit, and it's not that anymore. It certainly isn't.
Well, I want to really, we got so much to talk about. I could talk about this forever, but what was kind of funny on one of the lines that I think it was the first iPhone. It was the original iPhone. I'm online across the street. I got up around 4:00 in the morning, and it's across the street, so it's no big deal. And what was funny is that the line of the store was outside the mall, so you were physically outside. And when the store doors opened around, I don't know, 9:00 or whenever the doors open on the inside, you could hear a cheer, inside the mall that the doors had opened. And what I was impressed with is that it was a little chilly outside, San Jose, and Apple had arranged for, I think it was Starbucks or Pete's Coffee, to come out with like coffee cups, and they started giving coffee and pastries to everybody. So that was, I don't know if they'll do that anymore, but that used to be the interesting thing that they used to do in the old days. But without any further ado, let's go to the next topic here. And I got to ask this, and I could ask this about any of the companies that you cover, but Apple's such a unique one. What are some of the unique challenges that you have when you're covering Apple? Because they're not the most, outward-facing company sometimes when it comes to covering them. And, every company has that challenge to a degree. But I got to believe that you have, you've kind of managed your way around, dealing with the way they operate, especially with tech journalists.
I mean, I'm kind of blessed. CNBC is kind of blessed. We have a good relationship with the comms department at Apple. They know we're a business news channel, but that doesn't mean they're going to hand me scoops. They're never going to be like, oh, well, hear about this argument that happened inside. But, obviously sourcing is a challenge for everyone. I consider it, a little bit of my secret sauce. I think a lot of journalists consider sourcing to be, what they bring to the table. But honestly, the biggest challenge for me is focus, to be honest with you. I mean, Apple is 90,000 people, in the United States. That's U.S. employees. You have so many different things going on. Obviously, everyone cares about the phone. Everyone cares about their financials and the stock. They have, the stuff that's coming up next, whether car people are leaving, or, they just ramped up this AR set. You have that. You have retail, which is having more challenges. I just covered a story this morning that you're going to have to mask up if you're going back into any Apple store, for the foreseeable future. And they've got labor challenges there as well. So there are just so many different topics. And, I did a topic the other day, a story the other day about how they're working on driver's licenses for your iPhone. And it's really interesting the way they're interacting with governments to, make this happen. And is that material to Apple? I don't think so. I mean, it's a small division with, a couple scores of people working on it. It's not the main show. But if I'm working on every little bit, it's too much of a big beast. I think that's what people have to think about. Apple's so big, what do you focus on? Do you focus on the privacy stuff? If you could have made a whole full-time beat just doing the App Store stuff, just whether the rules are going to change over the cut or how that's going to work. But my thing is, and this is a thing that I talk about with my editors every day, with the people who run CNBC.com, are we, do we have to go beat by beat here? Obviously people care, but is this the main story about what's going on in Apple right now? Or is it, the iPhone 14, or is it supply chain, or is it Tim Cook in China? There's a lot going on. And I think the biggest challenge is the company's so big and so influential that you have to pick your spots. You really can't just cover everything.
No, I think that's a great point, because from a business standpoint, they are so large from a top line revenue standpoint that even internally, when a new product comes out, they get into a new business. For example, let's just use HomePods as an example. You know, the HomePod portion of Apple's overall business is so small. Now, it would be, if it was a standalone company, it would be actually
it'd be Fortune 50 or Fortune 100. That's what they say, you know, not HomePod, but for the watch. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you isolate it, you know, it's a small part of Apple's revenue. And, you know, Apple's like any other company. Usually the businesses that are dominant from a revenue portfolio standpoint tend to get the most attention, even though from a news standpoint, the news might be obviously, you know, people like bright shiny objects. So Apple's got a new product, and you hear a swishing sound, and the media's attention moves to that. So, but it's interesting because in your line of work, sometimes, especially like take Apple, you know, the Apple Car,
right, which appears, you know, to be many years in the future. You know,
yes.
You know, we're many years in the future. They've changed leadership a few times. The former leader left this year, Mark Field. You know, is that a news story? You know, do the people at CNBC, were they really watching Mark Field and him leaving? And of course, he went to Ford. So, you know, we covered that. But that's a big question, because it is the next big thing. But honestly, you know, there are a lot of people at Apple that didn't think about it at all today, you know, period. You know.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and sometimes you got to be a little bit of an Inspector Clouseau, although you're not like Peter Sellers. So let me be clear about that. But you know, you have to almost, if they're not going to be out, if they're not going to share information about their future businesses, which Apple does not do, you have to back into, okay, who are they hiring? You know what, and that's not always foolproof, because Apple's aware of that, and sometimes they can do a little bit of not misleading stuff, but maybe the people that they're hiring is not exactly for the area that you think.
I mean, Apple can use more mechanical engineers and battery engineers every day of the week, you know, and twice on Friday. You know, just because they hired a battery guy from BMW, that does not mean that guy is going to be working on automotive batteries. But it could, you know, because I think they're working on automotive batteries, you know.
Right. Well, and let's face it, they are in the car business right now. It's called Apple CarPlay, you know, and they have a presence there. You could argue right now that, and they want obviously their tentacles into bigger parts of the car, and it's hard to do that with, you know, they've probably gone as far as they can right now with their software interface. It's hard to buy a car today without at least a choice.
Yeah.
You know,
no, they really took it. I did a story on that recently. They really came in and you know, like the auto people and the tier ones really spent a lot of money trying to do the infotainment console and stack, and Apple just came in, and Google to a lesser extent with Android Auto as well, just came in and we're like, no, this is, and so a lot of people think, you know, the Apple Car is already there. I come in, I plug in my phone. And on the other hand, you know, CarPlay is a great example of something that, you know, is a very big deal to a lot of people. You know, I like the Fords of the world really care about CarPlay. Anyone who's into automotives or suppliers think that that's an important thing they're keeping an eye on. Inside Apple, it's one division inside the services division. You know, you build the org chart, not that they have one, but you know, you build out the org chart and you're like, oh, this is not the center. This is not taking up Tim Cook's time.
No. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And the car thing is, it's a big, bright, it's a humongous, bright, shiny object. You know, I mean, I do believe that Apple, and we'll get into this in a second, I think Apple will ultimately get into the car business. I don't think it's going to be next year. It's probably 2 to 3 years out, because it's a big deal. And it may manifest itself in a way that a lot of people don't expect it to manifest itself. Like, for example, Apple doing it themselves. It probably will be via some type of acquisition of an existing car manufacturer or a major partnership, you know, because of I can't even imagine the infrastructure that you need to get into the car business. I mean, that's not a low hurdle business to do, but we'll
get to that. We'll get to that. I got thoughts. I can't speculate too much, but I definitely have thoughts.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But you know what I want to hit you on, because iOS 15 just came out. You know, Apple, I think among the Amazon, Facebooks, and Googles of the world, you know, privacy is obviously a big deal. You know, my personal view is that among, you know, the major smartphone and smart device platform players, Apple probably has the most I think, supportive role on, really, trying to implement privacy protections in a meaningful way. It's not just window dressing. They're not perfect, but I think they've done a fairly reasonable job. What's your perception on the way Apple handles privacy versus the other big, the fan company, so to speak?
Well, I mean, I've been covering Apple since 2016. In my most recent stint, and really paying attention to them since 2014. And the fact is, you have to give them credit. It's a big ship, and they started pointing it towards privacy in 2014. Yeah. It was really clear that they started pointing. This is not a new thing. It's not like a year-over-year thing. In 2014, Tim Cook came out, did an open letter about privacy. Then in 2016. They were talking about on-device encryption. So this is a multi-year, deep priority for everyone in Apple, and I think that's the salient fact. That's what you have to, if you're comparing it to the other three. In 2014, they started orienting their ship this way, and these big ships, they take a long time. So maybe, and I don't cover these other ones as closely, and obviously their business models are different, but maybe, you can see it with Google and the way they're going to do Flock and some of these ad tracking technologies. They're trying to orient stuff into more on device versus on cloud, but these are big ships. You got to make that decision back in 2014 to start implementing these kind of features in 2020. And then the other thing I got to say is, from my conversations, with people in the privacy space who have worked on Apple stuff and that kind of thing, you really get the sense that Apple considers privacy to be an engineering issue as well. They think that they have better cryptographers and that they can design new, unique systems that have quote unquote privacy preserving, principles at them. And I think the best example of this is the Find My network. A lot of people, again, this goes back to, this is a small product, on Apple's list of products, it's like 30, but no one else has been able to do, kind of what they did. And obviously they say it's more private and that they can create a lost item tracker network all over the United States because they did the math, they did the cryptography, they designed the system, and they have that trust all the way down to the silicon on their chip. So I think that gets lost a lot when people talk about it, that Apple attacks privacy. And obviously they say it's a human right, but they attack it from an engineering perspective and a cryptography perspective. And you hear a lot, phrases like privacy by design, that you don't have to give up the benefits of a digital connected world, the cloud, and that kind of thing. That's really what they're saying. Now, obviously, I'm not a cryptographer. I'm not a security researcher. I kind of stay away from a lot of security stories. So, we do have to really address Apple's claims here, and really scrutinize them because, these are long tail. Something goes wrong, we can't have that go wrong ever. And someone has to be responsible. But on the other hand, I think people misunderstand two things, that Apple started doing this 2014. That's when they started getting loud. They try to attach it back to Steve Jobs. I'm a little more skeptical on that. I really personally started to see it around 2014. And the fact that they have, privacy engineers. They have people that are trying to build new systems with these principles, and right. It's an engineering challenge to them.
Right. But what's interesting, Kif, is that, and I agree with you, there is a privacy discipline that they want that to be embedded in the Apple DNA, and I think they largely do that. And I agree with everything you said. Now, keep in mind, just to use Apple AirTags as an example, AirTags is a very small part of their revenue. Another bright, shiny object that gets a lot of people's attention because, you've had products like Tile out there for quite some time, which were really the original tracker. And then now there's other devices on the market. But then the market wakes up when, like anything else, Apple gets in the category. There are significant privacy, I wouldn't say privacy issues with AirTags, but that category, I mean, like you said, all you need is, because it's, in some ways, if there was no privacy capability built into AirTags, and there is, it would be the choice of technology for the average stalker. I mean,
there's still issues. There were news articles this last week about looking for the BMWs up in Canada and putting an AirTag down on the bottom. That you have to balance this. Obviously, this technology didn't exist. If you were really, committed to this, you probably could have 5 years ago gone to the dark web and bought a GPS tracker. It existed, but the fact that now it's an innocuous thing that everyone has in their backpack, those are societal issues. And Apple, I think, did an okay job, addressing those when AirTag came out. But the core of it really is that they have this really neat cryptographic system that no one is giving away their, location at any point, but can, ping a bike or your AirPods or, an AirTag lost in your backpack. They thought it through, but like a couple years ago, they asked Johnny Ive, it's like, what do you make of phone addiction, which obviously is a thing that's happened. And, he didn't have a great answer at the time. He went to the watch and that kind of thing. But when you create something new, and the smartphone is still brand new, it is 15 years old, you're not going to be able to anticipate the way it impacts society. And a lot of technology reporters really focus on that, really focus on, here's how the technology is impacting society. That's less of my specialty. I focus on the corporate stuff, but it's a big story, and it's a big story with all these FANGs. They're all so big that they can make little changes and no one knows. But
Kif, let me just jump in for a second. Is there a cynical part of this, and then we'll get to the last topic that I want to talk about, which is really where I think the fun is going to be. Other companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all depend in many ways on advertising. Advertising is a big deal, especially with Google. I mean, Google makes tons and tons of money on sheer digital ads. The fact of the matter is that Apple has such great margins on their hardware products. A cynic might say, well, since their margins are so great on the hardware side, it allows them to be so careful about privacy and not careful about privacy, but be highly protective of it. I tend to think that it really is a genuine part of the Apple DNA, but the other companies might say behind closed doors, hey, we don't have those kind of margins from a hardware standpoint. So we depend, on digital advertising, which in many ways have privacy issues. It's gotten a bit better, but still it's a bit of a challenge for the companies like the Googles and Facebooks and Amazons of the world. So how do you balance that cynical?
I bet it's both true. You can't deny that Apple's not an advertising company. That comes out of Tim Cook's mouth. I mean, like I said, down 30 on the thing. There are a couple products, but they don't generally, they don't have a lot of ad units or ad sales, and obviously they can make that choice, because of their strength with their premium hardware. On the other hand, you can attack the thought experiment from the other way, which is, Apple's hardware is premium priced right now, and you ask people why that is, and they got the brand, people want the stainless steel, it looks nice, the screen is whatever. But let's be honest, if I today was told, you can never use Apple products again, you have to use Android. I miss iMessage, but life would go on. But the one way you can continue to differentiate yourself is saying, we have better privacy and security, and they can reasonably make that claim because they own the entire stack. Whereas a Samsung doesn't own parts of its stack, whether it's the Qualcomm chip or the Google software. So you can look at both ways. I tend to agree with the cynics, but I don't think there's a meeting where Apple executives are like, haha, like we have this premium hardware, so let's kneecap the FANGs. And if they did, that would get, Congress would get that email and a subpoena, and, it'd be off to the races. So I'm cynical about it. I just don't think that they were thinking about either boosting their own few advertising products, but or really, the hyper competitive aspect. I mean, Google still pays Apple billions of dollars per year to be the default search engine. So it's not. I don't get the sense that they think all targeted advertisement or data collection from the FANGs is evil.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say about that, and just because I agree with your analysis, the point I would make too, I think one of the things that we in the industry we use that whole full stack, provides lots of benefits if you're in the position of Apple from a product development standpoint. But there is also this ecosystem that when disparate devices, your smartphone, your tablet, your smartwatch, your smart speaker, your desktop computer, your portable computer, that they all work together and have a similar user experience, it allows that user tends to get a lot more productive. And speaking for myself, and I bet you're like me, I'm the CIO IT for my family. And when my mom, who lives in South Carolina, has a problem with her iPhone, the last thing if she had an Android phone, the last thing I need right now is, okay, what version of phone do you have? What version of the Android operating system? Because everything works a little bit differently from device to device. And the Apple plays it up to a huge degree. Let's talk about the last topic I want to jump into in the few minutes we have left here. This is kind of roll the roulette table type of thing, but what new categories do you think Apple seriously might get into 2000 without overly speculating? I'm sure you don't want to.
I have to be careful here because I have reporting going on these topics, and I can only really talk about what I've published because I don't want to give it all away. But I think 2022 is going to be a bigger year for Apple than 2021. I think that's what is becoming clear. I mean, not maybe in terms of sales or whatever, but in terms of the number of things that are getting ready for the next generation, for the number of projects that have been in the hopper for a long time. It's hard to date, but we know Apple is working on AR headsets in the technology development group. Now, whether they announce it and then they release it 6 months later, I don't know yet. Again, this is something I would love to know and confirm, but you can see that there is a little bit of a sea parting for major upgrades, particularly to the phone, to the watch, maybe not to the Macs so much because that just happened. One thing I will eat my hat if Apple releases a car next year, obviously, like that is a category I don't think they will be entering next year. The other thing is you can look at the services. They've been really good at introducing a lot of services. Last year they had this fitness one. Kate brought into a bundle. They had privacy services over the summer. They have this VPN type thing. So I think you could see either at WWDC in June or with the new iPhones in the fall, more paid monthly services that Apple would release or at least talk about.
Yeah, I think there's some no-brainer categories. Next year will be the end of that second-year transition period for Apple Silicon that they talked about. When they introduced the first M1, back in December of last year, they were very public in saying it's going to take us a couple of years to get away from or move away from Intel. I mean, that to me is a no-brainer type of thing. So you'll see them continue to refresh their product line with the new Apple Silicon processor. They'll probably introduce a next generation M1, the M2, who knows? But that would obviously be the logical thing. I do think the AR, VR glasses finally will probably see something, or at least some type of first iteration.
I don't know for sure, and obviously I don't want to speculate, but I don't think that those are going to be a surprise one more thing. I don't think it's going to be a surprise one more thing, and then you buy it that day. I think that would be very difficult, especially with an all-new supply chain.
Yep, no, that's absolutely true. But the interesting thing about the whole AR VR category, just to say this for obvious reasons, is that the AR and VR, despite all the excitement around it, you've got Facebook now that's rebranded the company as Meta, and they're kind of really making a huge bet that the metaverse and VR AR is going to be the thing. It's still a very niche-y category. AR and VR. I mean,
I think there's a chance it remains niche-y. Honestly, for me, it's not going to be about doing a better VR headset. I've tried a lot of them, and obviously Apple's really good with soft goods. They're really good with chips. They're really good with displays. I have no doubt that they can produce a really nice VR headset. I want to see what I can do with it, and I think that's
the thing that I struggle with, in that the smartphone is a device. It's my iPhone 13. The shameless plug for Apple. This device is always with me. We've been trained for 14 years that you have a smartphone with you. There are people who sleep with them. They have them strapped to their head. It's one of those devices that you always have with you. AR and VR glasses, no matter how elegant they make them, and to your point, Apple does have fantastic design expertise. They will come out with a great looking set of glasses. But I am not sure that, even unless you show a compelling usage model, that I cannot be, that they provide some type of benefit that's so unbelievable that I'm willing to be out in public looking like I'm from a science fiction movie of the future. And
it's also, this thing could take a long time. I don't know if you're going to be wearing this one out in public. I don't think V1 is a public thing. I think V1 is probably an indoor thing with a little bit of pass through. But again, it's so there's this thing, right? So when iOS 14 came out, there was this new thing on Maps, right? And if you're using Apple Maps in some parts of the country, it can do overlays which show you which way to go. So the one I tested, and the example is like, I'm on Market Street, and you know how Market Street, all the cross streets are jaggy and weird, and they're like, okay, turn right here on Montgomery, and that's cool, I guess. It's like I the first time I saw an iPhone before I was a reporter or whatever, I immediately knew what it could do for me. It had maps, it had a full browser. I immediately, and it had my iPod in there, and they called it the iPod app, and I immediately knew what it was going to do for my life. I've been to AWE, which is Augmented World Expo, down in San Jose. It's a big AR conference, last 4 years. And I was really excited. I used to be really into Magic Leap with the whale coming out and all that stuff. I'm still waiting. I think the issue may not be, and of course, Apple conceals everything when they come into a new category. But I need to see what it is. What are we talking about? Are we talking about gear? What is the job to be done? If the job to be done is 8K Ted Lasso in front of your eyes, okay, I don't think that's a $100 million product, a 100 million unit product. But I don't know. If I knew, I'd be in the labs working on this stuff.
I don't want to overly speculate either, but I think the obvious ones, because I agree, a V1 probably likely will be something that you use in your home. But I think the e-commerce angle, in terms of, hey, there's certain, instead of trying an outfit on, I could put these. Solutions.
Even that one, it's like you're going to buy a $2,000 VR headset, a $3,000 VR headset to try on, a $30 pair of Dockers khakis when Amazon's going to ship them back right away. The one I remember a couple years ago, someone well placed in the industry was telling me about car buying. You want to buy this Ford truck. You can do it, and on your phone, you go like this, and all of a sudden the Ford truck is right there. Why wouldn't you go to the Ford dealership? I'm pro the future, but we have to be able to ask these basic questions.
Right. I agree. I agree with that. It's all going to depend on price point. It's hard for me to believe, by the way, Apple would come out with a 2,000 set of VR glasses. I think that's probably a pretty lofty price point. But nevertheless, I agree with the analysis. I think entertainment obviously will be a big angle to it. Will that be sufficient?
I think entertainment is the obvious one, right? Yeah. Entertainment is, people are looking for these experiences and they want to get them how they are. I just, it's a big question. It's, as these things come out, and obviously, to go back to the cynical part, why Facebook is doing this. You understand why Facebook is doing this. They want a phone. They don't own the phone. They play by Apple's rules. There are products that they want to launch that they can't because of App Store rules. And they don't want that to happen the next generation. Apple, it needs to keep going. It needs to figure out what the next big thing is. But, I am nervous that the next year the Meta glasses come out, the Apple headset comes out, all this stuff comes out, and it's 6 months later. It's like, have you been using this? I don't know. Is it NBA games and VR? I don't know what the answer is, but I think people are still underappreciating that.
I think, just to wrap a bow on this, I think what people are waiting for is the old, and I'm going to date myself and say
killer app.
Yeah, the killer app. The Lotus 123 or
the Visit Calc.
Well, listen, Kif, thank you. This was great. Thank you for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Mark Vena Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great week. And Kif, thanks again.
Anytime.